Couldn't tell if it was recording or not. It wasn't activating. Um, I don't know. It's 4:52, so it's kind of interesting how it gets dark so much early. I even noticed a couple of days before daylight savings time that it was in the morning at 7:30 in the morning. It was pitch dark. And I guess they said yes. When was it? I think this last daylight savings time, they said it was going to be the last change in daylight savings time. Again, next year they're going to start and just leave it. They're not going to mess with it at all, supposedly. So it's kind of interesting how these new things are taking effect next year. And but what come to my mind that I wanted to share? It come to my mind earlier because I was watching a little bit of the Big Bang Theory. Is Sheldon in their, I think it's in their living room, they have this very tall stand. So picture the size of me from my head to my toe, but it's a DNA strand. It's a big, big DNA strand that goes all the way up to the top to all the way down to the bottom. It's twirling and everything. Now, the thing about the DNA strand is the name nucleus, something Dean. Oh my gosh, it's a big long word, but it's DI something nucleus. The DI in the middle of the beginning of the name, DI, that represents two atoms. And I figured that out when I was looking up the symbolism for den, like the lion's den, or if we look at, this is the right side of my body. If we look over here, the lion's den usually has like the mother and son. Another example would be on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. They're up in a den, right? Up on a cliff in a den. And mother and child are in the cave. Father comes in every once in a while, to roll the nest and stuff. So den means two atoms, and if you look at two atoms, it's like the two fish, or the two chromosomes. Like I was telling you, my male body is made up of my Y chromosome and my X chromosome. And now, when you look it up online, it's going to say XY chromosome, and it's going to say, and the reason why it says XY chromosome is because in Hebrew, you read Hebrew, you read this way. It's just like a clock. So picture my face as a clock, and we read time as going, so you got a clock and you go 1, 2, 3. So we're reading time as time goes this way. But time is going to end up Back to the Future. It's going to go backwards. And it's another clue of back. It means Hebrew is backwards to English. And that's what everything's based up on, created out of this world is Hebrew, the foundation of it. So when going back to the Big Bang Theory, you've got like this big model of a DNA strand that's, twirling from the floor up to about my height. And I seen that yesterday or today when I was watching the Big Bang Theory. Well, actually, I've seen it a couple of times, but I think when I seen it again, it clicked into my mind. You remember on Star Trek when they beam people up, like beam me up, Scotty, right? Well, when they're beaming people up, they're moving their atoms around, right? They're piecing them back together. So picture this is my body is my DNA strand, And, when I get beamed up, they're beaming up my X and Y chromosome strand, my serpent DNA. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because remember when Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and she found the tomb was open. So it's like the tomb is this big circle stone, like a nickel. The five senses rolled the door back. So they've rolled the door back, and they were in fear because she looked in, and she was afraid that they've taken Jesus's body, and where they've taken him. And then she went and told the disciples and Peter, because Peter was really close to Jesus, Simon Peter, which is really quite interesting because Simon Peter is representing our pineal gland. Simon Peter. It's our dragon brain, right? So Jesus was really close. Jesus is the dragon, the light, to Simon Peter. So you got that image in your mind about beam me up, Scotty. So you got your DNA strand, right? And when you get up on the ship, they beam you, put all the DNA strand back together, bringing you back into form. And I was like thinking about Jesus in the tomb, because when they ran in and seen that, they mentioned it was a striped linen over his body. So from his chest, so probably from his neck down to his, excuse me, I'm talking too much. I started talking earlier and I got rid of those videos. So when they went in there, this says another disciple beat Simon Peter in there. And when they went in, the striped linen was untouched. It was the striped linen was still laying in its place, like it was over Jesus's body, untouched. There was they call it like a napkin or a towel-like kind of thing, that was wrapped around Jesus's head, and it was still laying in its same place. And so they were trying to figure out, how did they take Jesus? How did they get him out of there by, with nothing untouched, right? Where did they take him? Well, it's kind of interesting because it's symbolism. It's like God had pulled him, and actually it's in the movie Legion as well, where Michael and Gabriel are fighting, and Gabriel tells that guy that's got the last child and his girlfriend, he's like, follow the instructions are on your body, right? And so all this symbolism is going off of Gabriel onto this guy's body, right? And the guy's looking at his body and seeing all these images and symbols, and he's like, I don't know how to read these. How do I read this? And he kept telling him, you will know. And then he gets in a fight with Michael, and then Michael ends up killing Gabriel, because remember, Gabriel took off his wings to come back down to save the last child, because he disagreed with God. And then Michael was upset at Gabriel for, you're going against God, that'd be the last time you do that. And so that's when Michael come down to challenge Gabriel. He ends up killing Gabriel because Gabriel's mortal, because when he come down onto the ground, he cut off his wings and his halo fell to the floor. So it's kind of interesting. But when Michael stabbed him to kill him, they show a scene where it's like Star Trek, where they beamed his body out of that room back up somewhere. So he actually went back up to God. So God had beamed him out of that room. And I was like thinking, if we can just piece all this together, so it's like our DNA. That's why it's so important about our DNA and learning in this world. It's because I think there's some type of symbolism there. And I think that's the reason why they couldn't find any evidence of where Jesus was is because they beamed his body out of the, from underneath the sheets. And somebody wrote a verse in there saying that they somehow got his body out of there and they folded up the sheets really nicely. Well, they didn't fold up the sheets. That's not what scripture says. It just says it still lays there. It's, untouched. So imagine me laying down with the sheet over me. But the thing about it is, it's called the shroud of something, but it shows Jesus's face. It was like he was burnt. His image, carbon was burnt into the sheet itself, which is quite interesting because they showed the shroud as it being one sheet from his head to his toes, but in scripture, I think it's John 20 or something like that. They talk about, I was wondering if that was my lights. They talk about how nothing was untouched and this shroud around his head was separate. But if you look at the shroud that they have of Jesus on the world stage, it's one sheet from head to toe. And they were they were supposedly taking the DNA off of that. And this is just a rumor, but I heard that that's how Prince Henry, or is it Prince? It's not Prince, not Prince Henry. I think it's his older brother. Because his older brother, they have pictures of him where he's holding a lamb in his arms. So it's like it's portraying him as he is Jesus, that kind of thing, or the bloodline of Jesus, which I think that's what they were doing. They were taking the DNA samples off the shroud. And that's what I want to get to is, I bet you anything, Jesus didn't leave his DNA. Well, his body wasn't found, and I think God was preventing them to take his DNA or leave his DNA and start cloning, Christ's, that type of symbolism. But I just want to mention real quick, and, to everybody out there, to where there's a reason by Star Trek, there's a lot of that, beaming me here, beaming there to this transporter. It's like a transporter. How they beam us out of here. And I think that's done through our atoms, our DNA. But anyway, and I figured it out when I seen the Big Bang Theory and seen this big model of a DNA strand. And then I was like, well, that's the size of a human. That's the size of me, is that stand in the DNA strand. And I got to thinking about that. I was like, oh, I wonder if that's like Star Trek, because when they beam somebody on board or off board, is all those particles, right? Well, if you look at a DNA strand, it's a bunch of particles that are going around in a twisty circle. But anyway, what do you think about that? Pretty cool, right? Well, it's 5:06 now, and it's almost pretty dark. You can tell by the screen, too. Let's see if we can pull anything out cool, or if anything will show. My face looks really dark in this light, though. Let's see if we can see anything cool. There was some cool images on my neck, I tell you. I think it was one of these sides. There was some cool images. But anyway, have a great night, everybody. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying this.